2 hospitalization because of alcohol poisoning during my freshman year in college. That was nothing. That was just the tip of an iceberg. Because, like I said, everyone's like, oh, no big deal. I've been hospitalized before. It's fine. Yeah, your school insurance will take care of that. So you just keep going on, because if your circle around you, if your echo chamber doesn't question it, you don't question it, right? So fast move forward. The final straw that broke camel's back, so to speak, was because of...
Hey everybody, and welcome to the Soberful podcast. I have a guest with me today. I would like to welcome Benoit Kim. Hi, Benoit.
Morning. How are you doing?
Good. I have been a guest on Benoit's podcast, and that will be out at some point. And we just had a really, really good conversation. And I was like, I want to know more about you. You are probably one of the most interesting people I've ever met, and you give a different perspective of sobriety. So let me tell you just a little bit. Well, tell people a little bit about yourself. You're a veteran. You're now a psychotherapist. You're a podcaster. What else do people need to know about you?
I'm a son. I'm engaged to my fiance. I'm an older brother. I'm a deacon at my church every Sunday, because I do feel like gratitude is probably a good basket, or altruism of basket is probably where we could spend more effort. And that also helps us staying sober. And I think it's important to tell the difference between being productive in meaningful activities versus filling your life with meaningless distractions. So those are the main identities I like to wear day to day.
So you've packed a lot in, and you look like you're like 23. Like you've done a lot.
In my early 30s.
Can you tell us, because you have a very interesting, I guess I want to say origin story, how you grew up. Was it you described yourself as being tricultural? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
So the technical terms is third culture kids. So my name is French. So I was born in Paris, but then my mom gave up my right to EU and French citizenship without my consent, because, as you know, in France, birthright doesn't necessitate a citizenship like the United States does. So I had to live in Paris until 18 to have a shot at citizenship. But my mom ultimately she wanted me to pay homage to my nationality or my ethnicity of Korean. And she wanted me to go to the army to trim my rough edges off, her words. So she gave that up without asking me. But of course, that led me to here, and there's no regrets. But yeah, it's a lot. I went through a lot, and I feel like I was born in Paris, and then I moved around with my parents. I lived in Korea, which is my ethnicity, for about a year. And then I migrated to California and United States for boarding high school. So I lived in the United States by myself with my younger sister, without my parents. I would see them, or single parents, because I grew up with a single mom. I would see her once a year. And then I spent my higher education in the East Coast in the United States. And that leads me to here, where I'm early 30s, sitting across from you.
Okay, so there's quite a few things I want to unpack there. As a mother, I cannot get my head around about seeing my kids once a year. That's just, I can't even contemplate that. You went into the army in Korea. Is it mandatory service there?
So that's the funny part. So Korean army, just like Israeli army, it is compulsory. So you do have to go mandated training for 2 years. It's absolutely brutal. But it's not the actual training that's brutal. It's the hazing culture.
Whoa.
So a lot of people don't know about Korea, because especially with the rise of K-pop, K-drama, K-food, which is amazing. But there is a lot of this deep-seated patriarchal framework, just like Japan and Korea, where the woman's suffrage is not really a thing. Sure, it is on paper, but not really. Universal suffrage is not really a thing. On the paper it is, but not really in practicality. So my mom knew I would be ill-prepared for the hazing culture of Korean, because I'm very westernized and I'm a third culture kid. Because, like, for example, every language has 2 layers. One layer is the respectful tone. That's the respectful adage you use in terms of referring to elders or people who are older than you. And that older could be 2 months age gap or a year. And you have to pour drink with 2 hands. You have to turn away when you drink alcohol. And it's very respectful, right? Which is great. But a lot of people use that as a leverage to really haze you, saying that you need to do X, Y, and Z because I'm older. How dare you talk to me that way? How dare you talk back? How dare you think for yourself? So because of my deep-seated westernized education, my mom knew that I would get destroyed just emotionally, physically, because it is very abusive. In Korean Army culture, a lot more hush-hush than even United States Army is. So for that reason, I chose not to go. But then through stars, regrets or otherwise, I enrolled in the American United States Army 8 years ago, and I completed my 6 years, and I officially got out as an Army reservist about 2.5 years ago.
Oh, wow. So obviously you look Korean,
Mm-hmm.
but you are culturally very different. How is it for you being in Korea?
So I lived in Korea for such a short time, for only a year, and when I was younger. And of course, the experiences I call back in retrospect is not representative of the actual experiences where it would be if I was an adult. Like, for example, I didn't really experience the binge drinking culture of Korea because I was underage when I lived there. So when I do visit, it's very different. But I like to extrapolate into the United States as well, where I spent most of my life here, because like America is so big on racial identities, right? We're very big on labeling culture. And just like the recent affirmative action happened in Supreme Court, I do think there's a differences between the origins of a policy to really uphold certain marginalized communities. But then through iterations of time, policies need to change to adapt to the change of circumstances and the change of diversity, change of ethnicities, which the United States doesn't do that because policies change are slow. And so for me, I came here and I realized, wait, I'm a global citizen, right? I represent 3.5 cultures, right?
Yeah.
French, Korean, Chinese, and American.
Yeah.
But they're trying to put me in a box of this conformed identity of you're an Asian because of your racial markers, because of your skin pigmentations. And that's it. Not even Korean, Asian.
Yeah.
As if within Asia, there's not 65 different countries, right?
Yeah.
That there's all these different dialects and languages and social cultural different implications. So that was an interesting route where I felt like if I didn't conform to these tidal waves of like cultural assimilation as an Asian passing looking person, then I'll be the outsider. Like I felt rejected by my own people. Like Asians thought I was too American or too Americanized or too Western. And the Westerners thought I was too Asian. So I dealt with this racial, cultural navigations for quite a while until obviously you get older, you do a lot of introspections. Not drinking helped a lot because they gave me a lot of time to really think for myself and not really be swindled by the influences or the opinions of what is considered as popular.
There's so much that's fascinating about you, but it's a fascinating perspective and how we do put people in these big blobs and think they all think the same and they are the same. And so you didn't end up going into the army in Korea because it probably that did. As a mother, I probably wouldn't want you to go, but it was something that sounds like it almost felt like an obligation, that this is a rite of passage for Korean young men, and if I'm not going to do it there, then I need to do it in my adopted country. How was your experience in the military?
So just for a quick preface, like I said, my opinions are my own, and
Sure.
Some people may disagree, but I do feel like a lot of Koreans, like native Koreans, do not feel like the Korean army is a rite of passage. Because
okay.
there's not necessarily honor embedded in that, because it's more like this is just something you have to do.
Right.
There's no meaningful connections imbued in this commitment. It's just you do it or you're an outcast. And because to a point, it's so punitive. So for example, I'm a naturalized American citizenship, right? So I'm an American citizen-wise. So when I go to Korea, which I'm going in 2 months, in Japan, doing a 2-week trip with my fiance, I'm not going to get arrested at the airport. But if you're a green card holder in the US, you go back to the airport in Korea and you skipped your army training, you'll get detained.
Wow.
You can't even come back. You're detained and you're shipped to the military on that spot for 2 years.
Wow.
It's extremely punitive and it's very serious. And a lot of people who skipped, they can't go back until age 38. That's when the legal requirements for the army expires. So all that to say, if it's truly rite of passage and honorable, country wouldn't have them feel the need to really make this so punitive to force people to go. But segue to your question is time flies, right? And I like to tell people, I don't really do too many honorable things in the military. Yes, I joined military boot camp and I saw a lot, experienced a lot. But I think my personality has always been very compatible with the military lifestyle. I'm a morning riser, right? I wake up at 4:30 to begin with. So in terms of the physicality of the army or the disciplines, didn't really shape me up, or it wasn't as formative. What was formative though was the people that I saw. Is I realized so many people in the United States are so small-minded, not as a choice, but as a byproduct of their circumstances. So about 50% of military enrollees are about 18 years old. You can be 17 and apply to the army. And a lot of these 18, these are kids. They're cognitively self-developing. They have
Yeah.
no world out views. They're just operating based on their idiosyncrasies of what their parents said, communities, the pastors, the government, the news. So
And often that's their way out of poverty, and there's not really a whole lot of choices, and there's a lot of benefits to being in the American military. Yeah, they're children. It's horrifying.
Exactly right. Yeah. So they never seen such an amount of money. They never try out different cultures. They never really traveled, and a lot of their towns are 10,000 people. That's it. They can see who they know in their Walmart or supermarket almost every day. That's how small they are. As a reference, LA is about 3.6 million people. So I experienced a lot of like racism, I guess, and a lot of ignorances and a lot of discriminations from my white peers. But then through that, I actually gained a lot of empathy. I realized, oh, there is a fundamental difference between willful ignorance and just ignorance because of lack of exposure. And I was actually able to befriend a lot of these 18-year-olds who would say these like racial slurs and say a lot of things. They don't really know what they mean. They just say it because they've heard people say it online. And I was able to talk to them, just like podcast, have an immersive and non-judgmental conversations. And one of them is actually one of my closest friends. And he'll be probably invited to my wedding. And he's from a small town. So I think that really taught me the human nature and how like nuanced and complex we are. And we're just trying our best day to day, truly. But of course, like outside may not perceive it.
That is a fascinating insight and very compassionate as well, because I've never experienced racism. I've experienced sexism my entire life, but I've never experienced racism. And I can't imagine what that must be. How old were you when you signed up?
I was shipped to the military boot camp at age 20.
Okay. When did you, like the drinking culture, when did drinking, like how did you drink at that age?
I think my drinking is a good, I guess, mainstream data. I think it's quite representative of most Americans, I think. Well, most is 51. A lot of Americans, where I drank late because I brought up in a Christian household, right? A little bit more conservative. And my mom tried to be responsible, right? Because there is responsible drinking, like some European countries are, and there are irresponsible drinking, like American is, right? So for me, I didn't really drink much until I went to college. So you can imagine the floodgate broke loose and all hell. And I was like, oh, this is freedom. This is amazing. Let's just get inebriated. So it was that. I joined the Greek life, right? And wow, I didn't really understand what alcohol poisoning was. I mean, medically until Greek life, until drinking. Like, oh man, this vivid experience I remember was we were hazed so much as part of the Greek life where I was hospitalized twice in a week because of alcohol poisoning and my liver damage. And because of that, I missed my midterms. I failed because I missed my midterms. I was able to rescue one because I sent the email to my professor making up a lie, right? But that's the thing about drinking is you're forced to make a lot of lies, to cover up your tracks. And I like to think I like to abide by like my own moral compass. I like to know that I have integrities. But that's the power of alcohol. But yeah, my drinking life up till that point, and even till military, because it got worse, was just binge drinking, drink because that's what everyone does. And I also liked the taste of alcohol, like beer. So that was two horrible combinations. Because if you enjoy drinking, the social implications as a social lubricant, but you also enjoy the flavor of that, point of no return.
This is a shocking number. How many college kids die every year of alcohol-related causes? Every year. You'll need to be sitting down if you're listening. It's 1,800, which when I read that, I couldn't even believe it. 1,800 families are going to lose a child this year from some kind of alcohol-related event. There was one I remember a few years ago I read about where a girl in Minnesota, she was trying to get back to her sorority and she's so drunk she passed out outside and froze to death. it's a really, really, really shocking number. And the Greek system is a big part of that. Yeah, it's just terrible. And then I imagine the army is a pretty hard drinking culture.
Right. And even into the Greek life, where I didn't know that number, 1800, that is 1800. If you visualize that people, that's a lot of people.
That's a lot of people. And we know it's college binge drinking because their peer group that's the same age that don't go to college, that number is much, much lower. So it's the college cultural. Yeah. It's really, as a parent, it's terrifying. Yeah, it really is.
Yeah, I'm very big on system thinking because of my background as a former policymaker before I became a psychotherapist. And I think a lot of people only look at the explicit on the surface. And what I mean by that is, for example, you talked about sexism, like patriarchies deserves women. That's blatantly obvious. That's explicit. But the implicit is a lot of men also get discouraged by a patriarchal framework. That, real men don't talk about feelings. Real men, this false bravado. This is what a man should be like. Men talk like this. That's the implicit, right? And I think with drinking, the implicit of college drinking culture is the normalization.
Yes, the normalization of abnormal drinking.
Right. And like on Halloween or drinking like St. Patrick's Days or these like very abnormally large drinking days out of the abnormally drinking weeks or months, you will literally see women, like girls, in vulnerable clothing and guys passed out on the streets and nobody bets an eye because they're like, oh, they're just drunk. That's it. It's a passing thought. But if you were sober, everyone would be compassionate. They're like, oh, are you okay? Should we do something about this? Is this safe? It's kind of cold out in the East Coast. None of those thoughts. The only fleeting thought is, oh, they had a good time. They're too drunk. And you keep going to your next bar. That's the implicit.
Yeah, the way we normalize what is something, I mean, my experiences were horrific. I was lying in the gutter at 15 years old outside a pub with someone in my own vomit, with someone throwing a bucket of water over me. And that was just laughed off by everybody. That's horrific. We used to live in Champaign, Illinois. There's a big research university there, University of Illinois. And they... their spring break always falls around St. Patrick's Day, and the bars in the college kind of campus were really upset about that because that was a big revenue day. So they created unofficial St. Patrick's Day, which happened a week, like just when finals and just before the kids went off on their spring break. And it is a monstrous event now. And all of the local, like the big schools in Indianapolis, in Chicago, like it's like a massive, massive event. Let me tell you, how to be invisible, walk around a college campus during unofficial being over 40 and nobody can. But every other year a kid dies. Every other year and they talk about doing something, but it's almost out. I mean, it's not in anyone's control anymore. All of the local Midwestern universities know it. If you're within 2 or 3 hours, you've probably got a friend who goes there and you can, sleep on their floor and it's just a massive party. And they have these really tall high rises. And what seems to happen is every other year a kid just falls out of one of them. I mean, but we just carry on.
Like to go even darker, since it's early in the morning in the West Coast, so why not, is like that the implicit normalization goes societally too, right?
Yes.
Where drinking or death by drinking is not considered as a public health crisis or concerns by America. And that's it. If you look at the stats, like statistically, death by drinking is categorically on the same level as public health crisis. And death is end all be all. But I think death by drinking, just like suicide, is extremely sad. And suicide is a lot more nuanced and a lot more complicated. But similarly, alcohol death is also addictions, right? And addiction is complex. It's very nuanced. It's not just a moral issue. It's not just a willpower. It's not just because you're lazy, you don't care about your life. That's not it. Those are some of the reasons, but it's a lot more complex. I think drinking or death by drinking can be prevented, and we need to increase awareness. But when the government that is backed by so many lobbyists and so many big budget interests are promoting drinking as a culture, as a society, how can we fight this implicit and explicit influences? It's very hard. That's why we talked about during our show, if you don't drink, you are the crazy one in the group. Every single person will scrutinize you for Veronica, why not just one drink? It's your wedding. Come on, just one drink. Wow, you changed. You don't care about me? Just one drink. It's my wedding. One drink.
Yeah. You owe me this. Yeah.
Yeah, like why would you make me feel guilty for trying to do the difficult things of trying to maintain my sober state of mind? But if you tell them if you don't smoke cigarettes, don't smoke cannabis,
Well,
things
I
like
don't
that.
do crack cocaine.
Amazing. Yeah, good. Amazing. Good for you. Wow, proud of you. Amazing. But as soon as alcohol comes up, you feel like you're the crazy one. You're the one that kills fun and buzzkill and all.
Especially when you get sober fairly young. I was 27. How old were you when you stopped drinking?
I just passed my 3 years and 4 months. So yeah, 26, 27.
Yeah. So we that age, and for me, that was back in 23 years ago. And being British, because the British drinking culture is we're just a nation of alcoholics. I'll say it. We are. It's horrifically abusive. Drinking is normalized at every level. Doesn't matter what age you are, or class you are, or background you are, or ethnicity. It's out of control, and people just looked at me like I had two heads. How bad did it get, Benoit? Like, where did your drinking take you? And then tell us about how you got sober.
How much time do we have? It got worse. So the 2 hospitalization because of alcohol poisoning during my freshman year in college, that was nothing. That was just the tip of an iceberg. Because like I said, everyone's like, oh, no big deal. I've been hospitalized before. It's fine. Yeah, your school insurance will take care of that. So you just keep going on, because if your circle around you, if your echo chamber doesn't question it, you don't question it, right? So fast move forward, the final straw that broke camel's back, so to speak, was because of my increased conflict with my current fiance during my romantic relationship that I really quit. But the story itself is not that crazy. So I'll share something that's really, really crazy for me thinking back. Was 2 years prior to me quitting. I moved to Philadelphia from Pittsburgh at the time for my job. And I went out for the first time. Philadelphia is one of the 10 major cities. It's got about 1.3 million population. And you hear about stories in Philadelphia. So Philadelphia is known as a city of grit. That's a city where Kevin Hart, Will Smith, and a lot of these prolific people came out. And the street life is quite pronounced there. And it's very gritty as a city. It's gone through a lot. And it's the oldest city in the United States. You hear about the stories about, oh, don't leave your friends when you drink in Philadelphia. It's not a small city like Pittsburgh. It's not a college town. It's dangerous. But this is another thing, implicit things about American culture and news, is when you hear about death all the time, you get very desensitized to death. So when you hear about stabbing, when you hear about shooting in Philadelphia, you're just like, oh, cognitively, you're registering. But in terms of your heart, I call it the brain-heart knowledge gap. You're not really registering. You're like, oh, just the news. It's just a number for a distance. So I'm the type of person, I'm too social for my friends when I drink. I'm already extremely extroverted, but when I drink, I get even more extroverted. So I'll get bored of my friends and I'll leave them and make new friends while I'm drinking. And I used to be a social smoker. That's another thing about alcohol. It doesn't stop there. There's so many far-reaching implications based on the drinking itself. Like I said, the lies, like I said, smoking a lot of cigarettes, like chain smoke. I will not smoke when I'm sober, but I'll smoke 5-6 cigarettes in a row when I drink every single night. And I'll feel horrible. I'll lose my voice the next day. Right? Physically, I would just feel horrible because I like to work out and all that. So first night out, I was in Woody's. It's one of the very popular gay neighborhood nightclub in Philadelphia downtown. So I told myself, I'm in downtown, I'm safe. Not the case. In major cities, downtown is not safe. They're not synonymous. I ditched my friends as usual. I found myself way out to smoke a cigarette from strangers, and I had to use the bathroom. Whatever reasons, because I was blacked out, I went to the alleyway at this new club I've never been in my life, away from my friends and away from the comfort of a bathroom inside the club. And I was jumped. I got jumped. This person saw me clearly blacked out, peeing on the wall. And I had a nice belt on, nice outfit, nice shoes, obviously wallet and a phone. And the only thing I remember is he's asking me, give me your stuff. But this is another thing about blacking out, is the false, the diluted, like, audacity that you have. I felt audacious enough to question him. What are you going to do about it? Right? Because I'm in my early 20s, the ego, right? The male ego. And the guy had a knife. And I asked him, what are you going to do about it? And then I woke up in the ER with a scar. I have a scar right here I
Oh my
still suffer
God.
from short-term head trauma. I never recover memory from that weekend fully. But I woke up, like the naivete in me is like, oh, I probably just drank too much. That's the crazy part, where I just drank too much, became so patternized and embedded, where I instinctively thought that's the reason what happens. But the nurse came in with the apple juice with a trait. I still remember yesterday. And she's like, no, a bystander called you in 4 a.m. bleeding out in the alleyway behind Woody's because you got jumped. And I woke up with no belt, no wallet, no phone, no shoes. The guy took my shoes too, my nice loafers. So I had nothing on me. But funnily, this is my, I guess my Asian conditioning comes up. I'm so frugal that my initial instinct is my insurance does not cover ambulance fee because of the broken American healthcare system, and it's $5,000, $5,000 for ambulance. So I thought I'm not gonna get robbed, almost getting killed, and paying $5,000 for ambulance fee. So I left the hospital that morning as a John Doe, because on my hospital bracelet it said, so it said my name, but it spelled it wrong. So they never found me since. And this is the joke where I tell people it's the one time where microaggressions racially served me, because so my name is Benoit, but to Americans they hear it as Ben Wong, and because I'm Asian, they assumed my last name is Wong. So I think when I was half conscious, when they're trying to put my name down, they put my name spelled it wrong. So it wasn't my name at all. But the crazy story I want to really highlight is not the fact that I got jumped, almost got stabbed. I went to the police precinct. I filed a police report to a detective. And detective looked me in the eyes, Veronica, and asked me, did you bleed? And I said, yes, I have head trauma. My head hit the curb from the impact. He's like, no. Did you get stabbed? I said, no, because for whatever God reason, he didn't stab me. Thank the Lord. Seriously, he didn't stab me. He just knocked me out. And he says, don't bother. 10 to 15 people get stabbed every night in our precinct. And if you didn't get stabbed, your police report will not even make it to the top. So just be grateful that you survived. And whatever you did that got you that place, stop doing that. But here's the alcohol. I went out and drank the next weekend.
Yeah. God, it's so many stories about like that where you're just lucky to be alive. Like I have stories like that where sliding doors, right? You know, could it, who knows? Yeah. And people and lives are ended like that. Just stupid, pointless, stupid. Yeah. How did you get sober?
Yeah, I feel like alcohol is like playing Russian roulette of fate, right? You could get by a few times, in my case, many times. That's just one of the worst stories, but that's not the only story, right? But for me, so the big reason I call it divine intervention that I was able to get sober was because of my current fiance. And this is where I felt like I've been filled with so much guilt and shame because of drinking. That's what I don't realize is, especially with someone like me with a cultivated heightened self-awareness, like daily meditation practices, things like that. I do have a lot of awareness, but like when your actions don't rise up to your level of awareness, that actually becomes dissonance, right? It becomes like internal incongruences. And at least for me, it makes me feel very guilty. And it's like Dr. Brandon Brown's research, guilt over time becomes shame. And shame is identity based. And identity based is scary because it takes time to decondition and unprogram. So for me, like leading up to my like soberful moments, I realized that I became so shameful of my drinking identity because that's a lie. I've had plenty of good times when I drank. That's why you keep drinking, right? Because drinking serves a purpose in your life. For me, it kept me at bay from my inner reality and my inner landscape, what I was really running away from. But all that to say, I realized when you're sober with your increased awareness, you can slow it down. You know, metaphorically, you see the train departing the train station. You're like, oof, this is not looking good in terms of verbal conflict or quarrels or arguments with your partner. I was never physically violent, never, but I'll be verbally aggressive and verbally violent. Like I'll cuss a lot. I'm very articulate. So I know what to say at the right time in a certain manner to really hurt my fiance very deeply. Because that's the trust issues, right? You reveal a part of yourself to the other person through trust. But because of that, the other person used that as a leverage to hurt you back. So that was me, extremely unhealthy. But when I would drink, I will see the train departing and I'll literally tell myself, wow, the house is going to burn down. hopefully I can rescue it the next day. Because I knew there was nothing in that moment will be able to cognitively allow me to detach or disengage from my fury, my rage at that moment because of alcohol as an instigator. But if I were sober, I could say, hey, Becky, let's take a 5 minutes. Right, let me walk this off. Let me go to the next room and then we'll come back and we'll re-engage. Right. And so that happened one night. It was really bad. It was right before we're about to move to Los Angeles from Philadelphia because she's in medicine. She's a physician. So it was for her match outcome. And this was 1 month after we signed our lease in LA, in Philadelphia, and 1 week until we're about to fly out to move. And I did my career transitions aligned with her. So think about this. We just signed our lease a month ago. A week out, we're about to ship everything, fly across the country for new chapters of our life. And she broke up with me because of this extremely volatile fight.
Wow.
Like I was extremely angry because of something that happened. The gory details, I'm open to share it. It's not very relevant.
Yeah.
But what is relevant is
she'd had enough.
She's had enough. And she told me that, Benoit, I do not deserve this. I do not deserve this level of verbal violence from you. I do not deserve this level of disrespect from you. And we've been dating for 2.5 years by then, right? And the intention has always been there. It was lifelong commitment. And she said, I iterate these scenarios over time. And I know you love drinking. I know drinking is a part of you. And I get it. You're the life of the party. You have a lot of friends. I get it. It's your personality. I don't blame you for that. But I should not be on the recipient of your anger as the outcome of drinking. And for the first time, Veronica, I puked. I didn't understand what heartsick was. I never understood. My heart felt like someone was like squeezing my heart from inside out. I couldn't breathe. I had a pseudo panic attack. I went to the bathroom and vomited. I was on my knees. I'm a 6-foot male. I'm about 185 pounds. I think I was on my knees once when I was a kid, when my mom was disciplining me. So that aside, I was never on my knees as an adult. I begged her. I was like, Becky, please, I'm sorry. Take it back. She's like, I'm sorry. This is it. And I was like, holy crap. What am I doing with my life? And in that moment, I told Becky, you may not take me back, and I'm not doing this just for you, but for you and for us, I'm willing to quit drinking for good. And this was Saturday, the week prior. And then by the time we left for LA, within a week, she took me back and she really understood my vulnerability. And that's when she told me that you're very good at being vulnerable because you have a podcast. I had a podcast by then. I talk about stories all the time. But she said there is a difference between being vulnerable while telling those stories versus telling a vulnerable stories. Because telling vulnerable stories does not necessarily mean you're being vulnerable in the moment. But being vulnerable while telling a story, hits a different strength for her. And she agreed because she understood the commitment of me quitting drinking. And I quit the day after that. I never had a sip since.
That's really powerful and good on her that she loved herself enough to say enough, and that was the best thing that happened to you. What did you do? Did you go to any programs or therapy, or what helped you?
So I did not get to the programming, and this is where even as I share these stories, I still in the back of my mind, because I'm a therapist, I think about, if Benoit can do this through just some divine interventions and through a partner's accountability buddy, maybe I could do this without help. That's not the case because everyone is different, right? Like, yes, I have a highly addictive personality. Like after I quit drinking, I smoked vape, like e-cigarettes like crazy. I still drink Diet Coke. Like I drink like 3 Diet Cokes a day, right? So I still need that fill, so to speak. So just like a lot of recovering addicts, a lot of gum, right? We chew a lot of gum. We put a lot of things like to help with satiations for cravings. So I didn't join any AAs or 12-step programs. I did have some therapeutic help though.
Okay.
So I did have some help professionally that really acted as like a mirror, right? And even as a therapist, I always like to spend my first initial intake or the first assessment sessions, like contextualizing what therapy means to me, since it's different for everyone. And I work with a lot of male clients and patients. But even to me, I remember what the therapist told me. Because what therapists told me was like, hey, Benoit, I'm not here to fix you or change. Change only comes from within. People can try to uphold you, support you, accept you unconditionally and show up for you. But change has to come from within. Otherwise, it's not sustainable. And it's like the idea where I think all of us need an opportunity to pause. Just hit a pause button and review the archives and the patterns of our behaviors and who we are. Like, are you happy about the way you're showing up at work? Are you happy about the way you're showing up at your home, to your kids, to your husband, to your wife? And if you're not proud and happy about your version day to day, can we examine what's going on? Are there any root causes, contributing behaviors? And every time we did this exercise, I call it behavior gap analysis, analyzing the gap between your behaviors and your words. Mine was alcohol or substances. It just kept coming up. So she told me, what are you running away from? Like, what's the worst thing could happen? If you didn't numb your feelings and just let the feelings sit there and just let it brew a little bit. I was stunned. I never thought about that because I've always been introspective, but I think a lot of my like racing thoughts and a lot of my like intrusive thinking, I thought that was me actively thinking for myself, but I wasn't. I was being like enslaved and owned by my thoughts. Most of us are, unless you have practices, and that's a fact. Our brains are about 3 million years old. 3 million years old. You could be the most aware 75-year-old. You don't stand a chance against 3 million. That just evolutionarily primes brains. So through that, I realized, wow, yeah, what am I scared of? Oh, I don't like who I am when I'm sober and when I'm by myself. That's why I'm always with people. That's why I'm always at the life of the party. That's why I'm always filling out my days with my work, but also 3 to 4 social events every week. And once I stopped and let go of alcohol, I had so much more time, and I had more time to process what I've been running away from throughout my 20s.
So thank you for saying how helpful therapy has been for you. How have you found the experience of being in therapy and being a therapist? I was a psychotherapist. I don't practice as one anymore, but I deeply loved it. I remember I went on a retreat once, and there was this ex-Catholic priest who was a therapist, and he said, there's many kinds of people in the world. Some are boring, some are ignorant, some I don't like. But when anyone opens up their inner world to me, I'm infinitely fascinated. And I was like, and I just did it. It's always been that way. I did a retreat last week with some women, and once you create conditions to allow people to show what's really inside of them, some kind of magic occurs. I'm wondering what your experience of therapy is, being a therapist and being in therapy.
I would have loved to met the ex-priest turned therapist. That is
He was really, really interesting. I really liked him.
That's amazing. Yeah, he probably has a halo above him. He's glowing from the wisdom. But I do want to preface by saying that, of course, we both are advocates for mental health, coaching, therapy, or otherwise. It's just one of many avenues for change. Sure. And change happens. It can happen through different vehicles, so to speak. Just like reading a book can be therapeutic. But the difference is when you're sitting across a live human being who's looking at you for this intimate 1 hour, when you say something to that person as a promise or as an accountability measure, that thing hits you differently than just reading a book written by a dead person or a person you would never meet. It's powerful, the insight, but the accountability measure is not the same. And just having a person-to-person interaction it's a dying art, right? In-person conversations are dying because of the rise of social proof era, the rise of death of attentions, death of nuances. So I do strongly recommend in-person help seeking, whether it's coaching or therapy-wise for that reason. But to answer your question, Veronica, I don't really believe in too many universal truth in life. I think universal thread lines are few and far in between. But there are some that I've identified along the way through my life. And I think therapy for me, as a psychotherapist on the other side, as a helper, seeing patients and clients in my sessions, it revealed to me, because I've worked with quite a wide-ranging amount of populations, right? I worked at USC, University of Southern California Counseling Center last year. So I saw undergraduate students all the way to PhD, so ranging name. Currently, I see forensic clients, core mandated clients for substance use and severe mental illnesses. So it's very dear to my heart, addiction. If anything, since we talked, addiction has even become more pronounced in my professional career. So I'm naming these two very different demographics, because one is highly educated, doctorate, undergrad, graduate students at USC, one of the best schools in America. And the other part currently is people with severe substance use, co-occurring morbidities with severe mental illness, like schizophrenia, major depression, things like that. But the universal thread line I've seen for working with these populations for a few years is that they are all very human, and all of them are trying their best day to day. especially as recovering addicts, I think the battles become harder. Because I think sometimes when we get busy, a week flies by. I don't even know when we did our interview, maybe a couple months ago, right? So part of it kind of feels like a month ago. Part of it kind of feels like 6 months ago. It's loose. But for recovering addicts, my current patients, man, every day is hard. Every waking moment, the craving hits, right? You're thinking about, will I be happy again? I hear that the most. Will I ever be as happy as when I used to drink or use meth or use some of the other substances? And same for my college kids that I used to do sessions with. Same thing. I had a few people, sober or not, right? People who are struggling or not. They're like, will I ever be happy again for whatever reasons? And whatever their struggle they share and whatever things they want to celebrate, it comes down to, do you feel loved? Do you have meaningful connections in your life? Are you partaking in purposeful and meaningful activities day to day, right? And these are the universal thread lines. And of course, that theme get manifested through staying sober, through working through your social anxiety or working through depressions. So the symptoms look different, but I think the root cause is the same. And that's something I didn't really expect. I just thought I'm here as my calling. I'm here to help people. But I'm sure you could relate. A lot of times I'm actually learning more for my clients and patients about just life. Because I'm seated in a more privileged, in power positions because of my background. And sure, I've gone through some crazy experiences, which helps a lot. But I'm just saying that, man, what a blessing that I get to witness, because that's what therapy do. And coaches, right? We bear witnesses to people's pain. And by them revealing a part of who they are, I like to say I'm also sharing a piece of who I am with them. And through this dance, the changes do happen. But yeah, it's pretty profound for me, where I just see the universality of human nature, I think, in a therapy container.
What's inside of us when it's revealed what's inside of us? Because my own journey, I would rather have died than show you what was inside of me, because I just thought it was disgusting and would probably definitely confirm that I wasn't good enough and worthy of being loved. I viciously guarded what was inside of me. And I see that a lot in my clients, and it's the only way. None of us, I had a private practice when I was a psychotherapist in Cambridge in England, and I had a lot of postdoc and doctoral clients. And it was really, I went to a really shitty university in London, and my husband went to Cambridge. He did his PhD there. And it was really interesting to me because every single one of them thought there'd been some accident and they'd been let in by some glitch and they were about to be found out. Every single one of them. The Imposter Syndrome was rampant. I thought I was really fascinated. And the same when I've had, a client group, I've had a lot of well-known clients, but very successful people. Same thing. Some accident that they ended up in this situation. They're not good enough. It's going to get found out any day now. It's really interesting what's inside of people. We are very similar, inside, I think. Much more similar than we think.
And I think that's even more, actually, I'm a fan of Unilad, the British social media account, and they still talk about Cambridge students thinking it was an accidental admission even now in 2023. So reminds me of Bon Jovi's lyric, the more things change, the more things stay the same. I think we forget that, right? But just to add a few things where I love brain science. We talked about it, right? During our podcast. I just love brain science. But this is a very simple concept that, of course, neural pathways. Super simple cognitive concept. What that simply means is a pathway in your brain, neural pathways. But it's a very important idea because just like let's say in a forest, if there is a built-in pathways already carved in for you, and the alternative is you have to bike down this treacherous path, get hit by roses, right? Different obstacles. 99.9% of us will choose a carved out path. There is that 0.1% like to seek discomfort, might go to the want to be a pioneer. But I'm saying that because it's the same concept for our brains. But once again, it's explicit versus the implicit. So the explicit is, okay, do more that's good for you, that's going to become neural pathways over time, because that makes the habit forming easier and easier. So that's the obvious. That's explicit to people like us who understand the concept behind it. The implicit is by you choosing not to open up, by you choosing to not express how you're truly feeling, by you choosing not to do X, Y, and Z, like confronting your emotions through drinking, you're also directly creating opposite neural pathways. So when you're reconditioning, like for myself, when I had to recondition not drinking and actually talk about these things, I also had to work on deconditioning and getting rid of the other neural pathways that were created accidentally or unintentionally. So your work actually becomes double because part of you is carving out the new pathways for the new habit forming of not drinking, of opening up, talking about what you feel scared to reveal. But it's like the Roosevelt once said, right? I think everything you fear is on the other side of desire. No, everything you desire is on the other side of fear. If you really move forward, you'd be surprised by what's on the other side. So I think the work is the double for us if you want to carve out new pathways. But once they're built, they're also extremely solidified and the work gets easier and easier.
So tell us about what the future holds for you. When are you getting married?
May. It's, what is that, 8 months out? Ooh, that sounds crazy saying that out loud.
Where are you getting married?
Santa Barbara, California.
Oh, beautiful. Beautiful.
So like a local / destinations hybrid since it's about 4 hours from LA.
Gorgeous. That's exciting. And tell us a little bit about your podcast. So it's called Discover More.
So my mission statement on the podcast is I don't want to make it an extension of my psychotherapy. Since I like to tell people I don't like to work outside of my hours, but because people, you're a psychotherapist, tell me about this thing. So I was like, no. But so my podcast mission is I want to make Discover More synonymous with curiosity. Because I really feel like when we can uphold curiosity, that's our way of moving past fear, judgments, misunderstandings, all these labeling cultures and horrible things in the society nowadays by being curious, ask one more question. But it's a social science podcast. I had the opportunity for it to top chart a few times, which I'm very grateful for. And it's catered towards independent thinkers who like to think for themselves, think about critical issues by critical thinking, who also believe in mental health as a through line. So it's a show for independent thinkers with mental health as a through line. We got a YouTube channel. You can find it everywhere. I know everyone and their mothers have a podcast now. But I started this podcast 4 years ago. And through 4 years, it's become from passion project to a business now, which I'm really excited about. But I love it because, as I said, I think in-person immersive conversations are dying out. It really is. People get busier. People get more superficial. Yeah. Not always their fault, but it's just the societal current we're dealing with, whether we like it or not. So I take this very seriously. Like the 2 hours, an hour and a half, you and I, we talked to Veronica a while ago, and an hour we're talking today, and the other people I interact with literally across the world. It fulfills my basket of meaning tremendously. And it's honestly a deep privilege because I pinch myself all the time. How did I get here as an early 30-year-old, get to talk with Veronica, an expert on sobriety, and a bunch of other people? Seriously. Like without a podcast, this would not have been possible. Not a chance. So it's one of the most meaningful things I do in my life day to day.
You just packed so much into your life. I mean, it's like, college, military, getting sober, becoming a psychotherapist, and you're only 30, and now you're about to embark on the adventure of marriage and, I don't know, maybe having a family. And let me tell you, parenthood is like, I was 10 years sober when I had my first child, and I thought I knew a lot. I knew nothing. It opens up. There's a great parenting guru, Dr. Shivali, I can never say her last name, Tisibri. She says it's not about the raising of the child, it's about the raising of the parent. And that the job of parenting is to actually work on your own shit. And I thought I'd done that at 10 years sober, and nope, a whole bunch of stuff that I had to work on. Who knows, that may be in your future, that may not. But just, marriage is different from dating and living with someone. It is different. It's not just a piece of paper. It is a more meaningful commitment. So I wish you all the best for that next chapter. Hope to see some pictures on Instagram when that happens.
Could I share a quick quote? My favorite quote from Peter Thiel, the author of 021, the co-founder of PayPal. He said that when you reach the pinnacle of your career, you can do two things: find God or have kids. I already found God, so I guess having kids is the only thing that's left for me down the road.
I would say that's exclusive for men.
Oh, nuances. That's true.
Yeah,
it's very true.
Because women are under a clock.
That's true. Biological clock.
Yeah. But very interesting. Very interesting. Where can people find you if they want to check out where your podcast and your stuff?
Discover More podcast. Discover More on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you tune in. If you're more of a visual person, we do have a full-time editor, and we do take cinematic effects seriously because that's the culture we live in. So we also have a YouTube channel called Discover More Podcast. And Veronica's episode is coming out soon, probably within the next month or so, month and a half. So stay tuned. Very excited. We go much deeper into Veronica's experiences. And as everyone knows, Veronica is the expert on this topic. So I'm very excited to revisit our topics as well.
Yeah. And we'll put all the links to all of that in our show notes when this episode goes up, which I also have no idea when that's going to go out, but we'll figure it out. Benoit, it was really delightful. The most attractive human quality for me is curiosity. It's the most attractive human trait. And I don't know if I just feel when you're younger, you are curious, but you're also so full of insecurity and checking all the boxes that it kind of gets lost. And yeah, that's why I really enjoyed being your guest. Anyway, thank you so much, Benoit. It was great to have you here. Please check out the Discover More podcast, and everything will be in the show notes. And I will be back next week with another great episode of the Sober4 podcast. Thanks so much, everybody.